Space, the final frontier. These are the voyages of the Starship Gambler. Its continuing mission to seek out strange new worlds, to seek out new life and new civilizations, to boldly go where someone has very carefully laid out the infrastructure for us to go before. Oh man, I thought about that after I published yesterday's show and I was like, damn, I missed that opportunity. But luckily enough, comments, we can come back to it and we can revisit it. And there's another dimension to it. Certainly yesterday we explored the idea of the routing and the trade routes that CAIG is kind of hoping to create within the universe as a way to kind of, well, you go along these routes, you get refueled, and this is where you can also be interdicted, and this is where, you know, fun happens. And I've really made no secret in the past of the fact that I oppose that system wholeheartedly. Like, I am somebody who goes for the free warp system. I am someone who goes for the free exploration system. Now, I realize that this is my opinion. This is my take on the Star Citizen universe. This is not your take on the Star Citizen universe. Nor do I think that the entire game should be changed just to suit my tastes or opinions in this matter. However, my idealization of how this was all going to work out was that we were going to have a lot more reach on our ships. And as a pirate, you might think, well, wouldn't you want the routing system? I mean, you kind of laid it out that this is how it could work. And that would be kind of your ideal, how that would all work out. And I don't like it because it's you know, the idea of the interdiction sphere, all of that, it's cheap. It's a cheap mechanic, and I don't like the idea of I can just drop a bubble here or, you know, light up a field, however it's going to work, and then just start snagging people like that, easy peasy. I don't like that. I want there to be a chase. My ideal of what piracy was going to be at this point, the approach to a destination, whether you have to cross through the asteroid fields of Yela to get down to the surface, or here, when you're vulnerable, maybe going towards a docking location, that this is where the most threat would be. Whereas when you're traveling in between, you know, fairly distant points, that is more or less kind of, I hate to use this frickin' word, but it's more or less a safe space. It's a cuddly environment where, you know, moving on. So I kind of felt that this is where the risk should be. This is where, you know, we should be taking our chances. It's in this transition from high orbit to the upper atmosphere, to the lower atmosphere, to the surface, and then back again. This is where we could possibly get snagged. Or if someone has to go to Yela for whatever reason, they might have to manually transition the asteroid belt before they get down to the surface. And so people could kind of hang around the planet at different locations looking for people trying to do that. And then it would be kind of like, okay, bring everybody in. I found somebody. And it would be that sort of thing. I kind of looked for more of like a hounds and hunters type chase situation. I didn't really ever subscribe to the idea of just the interdiction bubble. And that, of course, is my opinion. That's my take on it. And I don't automatically assume that everyone should go with my opinion on that. And so I'm willing to adapt to the bubble and interdiction system. It's not what I would like, but I can deal with that. But beyond that, it's the idea of limiting exploration. And by creating kind of like these fixed routes, what does that do to the idea of exploration? Because you just can't free warp off into space and just see what's there. And that's something that I think there's a lot of people out there who are kind of looking forward to, who are kind of expecting. Now, for smaller exploration ships, like I believe it's the Origin 315P is the exploration version. Correct me if I'm wrong in the comments below. But for smaller exploration ships, you can make a case for the current system or what CIG is intending to do. You can say, well, that ship is more for like planetary surveys. Let's say you can take your 315P and you can circle around a planet and you might find, oh, there's a lot of tungsten over here, a lot of really high-grade tungsten ore. I can sell that to miners. I can sell that information to miners and make a whole bunch of money, put that up on the market. I can kind of see that. I can say, okay, yeah, that's all right. That's kind of a viable career. But for the larger deep space exploration ships like the Carrack, the Endeavour, I mean, arguably, you could say the Reclaimer as well, because the Reclaimer has those deep space scanners and it's built to go long range into deep space. This is one of the things that has always been said about it since the beginning, since the sale. And now, possibly, I mean, it's not confirmed. They may have misspoke. It's hard for, a CIG employee in an interview when they get confronted with a question, oh, how are all ships going to have to stop at the fuel stop? And then they have to go, well, they can't roll the numbers of every single ship that's available right now in their head in that exact moment and say, yep, they all have to stop. Whereas maybe the Reclaimer doesn't have to stop, but they misspoke, or they didn't think the Reclaimer was included in that. So it's possible, but the idea of being able to use these ships and even say possibly scan out something way off in the distance and then possibly calibrate your quantum drive to actually go to that position, it's still a fixed position in space. And I'm not sure if I kind of like the idea of more being able to just go where you want to go in the universe and not being restricted to trade lanes and trade routes and truck stops. I realize that Star Citizen is not Star Trek, nor is it built kind of on the same foundation as Star Trek. It's built more along the lines, I would say, of the Star Wars foundation to a certain degree, with fighters and carriers and that sort of thing. Whereas Star Trek is built around the idea of cruisers and destroyers and things like that that can kind of manage for themselves. But one of the things that I had always kind of hoped for with Star Citizen was that when you got to the bigger ships, that you were going to be able to go off in those uncharted directions. It wasn't going to be simply a case of sitting in, say, a ship like the Reclaimer, scanning something out, and it's something that the dev has already placed there, something that's fixed, that's there, that everyone knows is there, and then having to go to that spot. But rather, you could simply just go off in any direction and just see if there's something there. And maybe you don't encounter anything, maybe you do, and maybe you can find a little quiet spot that isn't an asteroid belt, that isn't a moon, that isn't a comet or anything like that. Maybe it's just the place between places and the space between spaces, where you can set up a little something like, for a while they were talking about the Kraken, which is, of course, Drake's scout carrier that, hopefully it will never materialize like this, but some people were talking about it like a space truck stop. And I thought, if you could go out into deep space like that and do something like that and set something like that up, and you could have your own little pirate hideaway using a ship like that, that would be something pretty interesting. That would be an interesting possibility if you could go out and locate it in some far off distant space and not as an in-between point between two, fixed points within the universe. Let's say you shut off your quantum drive and you just stop at the halfway point. Well, that's still somewhere where someone might be able to find you. Whereas if you go way out there in just any old direction, maybe you can find your own little quiet spot where you can operate from. One of my more distant ambitions and one of my more unlikely ambitions within the game was to be able to go way out in some of these star systems and maybe find, maybe a rogue planetoid or an asteroid, something like that, or maybe we can build a base. We're already talking about building bases on the surfaces of planets. That's something that's going to happen. Well, why not on the surface of some small planetoid somewhere? somewhere that is very hard or very unlikely to be found, and maybe set up a little homestead or a little warehouse to keep things in while they're transitioning into the legitimate market. Perhaps it's a bit of a lengthy process, change serial numbers and all that sort of stuff. But I just hope that with this new system, that the idea of free warping out into space, of really exploring what's out there, isn't going to be killed with this. I hope that hopefully they misspoke a little bit as to what ships could make the direct journey in between these two planets, and hopefully they're flexible enough to possibly allow us to just free warp from time to time and just go out and see what's out there. I suppose even if you can maybe scan out some very distant small celestial body that's very hard to find, and you have to have really good scanners to do it, and maybe be able to target that, calibrate to it, and then quantum to it, that would be a cool idea. I mean, I certainly don't expect something like that on the Caterpillar, because the Caterpillar's more or less, it's a semi-trailer for space, right? It's a tractor trailer. That's pretty much what it is as a ship. And so maybe something larger, like a Reclaimer or something bigger than that, could do something like that, or a Carrack, obviously. I hope so. I really do, because I think that it'd be a shame to create all this space, like all these billions and billions and billions of cubic kilometers, and then to use so little of it. Just a thought. Anyways, that's the show for today. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and thanks for watching.
Thank you for watching. So if you want to keep up with the latest and greatest in Star Citizen and Squadron 42's development, please follow us on our social media channels. See you soon.